Hello and good day, eh? Welcome to the Super Good Camping Podcast. My name is Pamela.
I'm Tim.
We are from supergoodcamping.com. We are here because we are on a mission to inspire other families to enjoy camping adventures such as we have with our kids. Continuing with our non-celebrity regular people doing great things series, today's guest is our very own super fan. He reached out to us in the summer last year, 2022, to tell us that we had rekindled his love of the outdoors and inspired him to try backcountry camping for the very first time. Please welcome super fan Chris. Woo, welcome, Chris.
Thanks. I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks so much for coming. Thanks for being on the episode.
Yeah, it's cool to be called a super fan. I definitely
am. Well, and you know what? We really have to thank you, only because we don't get a lot of feedback back and forth from people because, being a podcast, it's sort of a one-way street where we're talking and people are listening, but there's not a lot of back and forth or communication with us. So we really do appreciate the email that you sent because it was like, wow, feedback. That's what we're doing.
Printed it out, put it up on the bulletin board.
Highlight.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
A Facebook post like, oh, we have our own super fan. How awesome is that?
And it goes both ways too, because I think I'm appreciative of the fact that I found you guys as a podcast because it really got me back into camping. So it was a good thing for me to find too.
Yeah, so what did you do? So tell us about what you did.
Yeah, tell us about your first trip and then tell us what you've been doing since.
Sure. So I kind of got back into it mid-COVID when traveling was so chaotic and it was really hard to get out of the country or do anything, it seemed like, outdoors. And one of my good friends who's an avid camper kind of brought up the suggestion that I could go camping with him. And it was very new to me. I had started listening to your podcast, so I started getting into it and I started talking to him about it. So I think he saw my interest in it. And the first time I went out, which was in 2020, might have been 2020, yep. Was to Kawartha Highlands Provincial Park.
Yep.
Which was a great trip. He let me kind of plan the whole trip, which in hindsight probably wasn't the best idea to let someone who's never camped before plan it. Cause like right off the bat, I picked a really far site that had a lot of portages, not really knowing what was going to be involved in getting to it.
Sounds familiar.
I know all about that.
I swear I've heard this story before. Sorry, go on.
No problem. And so we ended up getting to our site with torch lights on our head and like after sundown, which is not ideal. It's hard to find a campsite in the middle of the night or after dark for that matter. But overall, it was a great experience. We ended up seeing a large moose, which I know I shared the picture with you, which was really cool. We even ended up seeing one of the park rangers on our way back, and he was even surprised that we saw that large of a moose so close to our camp for so long. He was there for about 2 hours. It was a cow moose. It was really cool. We made sure we stayed our distance and respected the animal. And you have to understand that like this is their area and you're just temporarily here.
Yep.
So it was really fun. And I think I just kind of sprungboard that into like as many trips as I could over the summer, going to as many different provincial parks as I could. And I did some in Queen Elizabeth Wildlands, Queen Elizabeth II Wildlands.
Yep.
Which was kind of interesting because in that park, there's no reservations. So there's kind of like if you're big into planning and big into like knowing where you're going to stay that night, it maybe not the best solution, but we didn't have an issue. There was a lot of different sites. None of them were really that taken. So there was a lot of options to choose from, but I think that would also depend on the weekend that you go for places that don't take reservations like that. So but yeah, all in all, since then, I've done about 3 or 4 trips, all in the same kind of area, either QE2 or the Kawartha Highlands Provincial Park. And I've just enjoyed it immensely. Like, the portaging hasn't been as bad as I thought. I prefer to backcountry in a kayak. So most of my friends do prefer the canoes, and we've done the 2-man canoes and even the 3-man canoes, which I would never do it again. I think the 3-mans, because they're really heavy.
Yes, they are.
Really heavy. So and we saw some people out with the Kevlar ones and very jealous about those because those looked really light, and I've heard you talk about them many times on your podcasts. So it's definitely something that I want to look into investing later on for sure.
The kayak, don't you find the kayak heavy?
It's fiberglass. It's pretty long. It's 15.5 feet. It's one of the sea kayaks, so it has a rudder as well, which I kind of enjoy for steering. But I don't find it that bad. It's probably like 60, 65 pounds, decently heavy, but I could one person it through all the portages. Not with all my gear though. It's definitely something where I have to unload everything, portage it, and then do a couple trips. But
Yeah.
I enjoy it, especially because we try to do a lot of fishing when we're out in the parks, and so I like to fish off a kayak too. So it's just somewhat preference. But I know a lot of my friends don't like going in kayaks. They don't like the fact that they're really low in the water line, that you tend to get a little more wet than you do when you're in a canoe, potentially. Sometimes it can be heavier or more awkward to portage. So I think a lot of it comes down to personal preference on how you like to do it. But yeah, I've been enjoying it a lot, and it's been a good experience for me. I'm very new to it, so I feel like going camping with someone who's done it many times before and who's gone to Algonquin and all the big parks, that's a huge advantage because you learn so much from just not everyone being a beginner.
Yeah, well, I mean, learning from mistakes is never, well, it could be a bad thing, I suppose.
Somehow.
But it's a good thing. To take, it's what I find is the little things. Like I've done a few trips. We did a camper Christina had a couple of courses, and one of them was a backcountry for beginners. So as part of gearing up to have that chat with her, she said, "Here, take the course. You won't learn anything from it." I said, you know what? How could I not learn something from it? Because it's from somebody else's perspective. Somebody else is going to have different experiences. So and I did, and sure as all get out, I've absolutely learned things. And so, camping with other people, especially when they have that sort of level of experience, is great because even if it's just little things you pick up, it's like, oh, I don't need to carry 4 pieces of cutlery. I can have two. I have one's actually my knife that I'm carrying for doing whatever for doing shavings for the your fire pit, and the other one's at one end it's a spoon, and the other end it's a fork, right? Like that kind of thing, right? So I just shaved 2 ounces, but you do that 18 times, and you've shaved half a pound or whatever, right? So there you go.
Cool. Well, I'm sure Tim is interested in QE2 because that's kind of on the schedule for this summer.
Yeah. So it's something that we were sort of looking into. Slightly terrified. I'm as a standard rule, I'm a Ontario Parks operating parks backcountry camper. This past summer we did French River, which was a brand new experience because it's a first come first serve, right? And you can only book it 2 weeks before, which absolutely terrifies me because I booked 5 months out, man. Like that's my thing, right? So we tried that. It was interesting, but I would say it was successful. So part of the thing was like, okay, cool, let's go do a non-operating, right? Let's go do QE2, which I just got a spanky new map of now. And yeah, and largely because it's like, well, Christ, if he can go out and do that in a first go round kind of a deal, why can't we? Let's go try it. Let's do that. Let's not book up, crazy busy. Let's try something different. So that we have a plan. We'll see how the 21-year-old plays out. But that Thomas and I are supposed to, that's going to be our July trip this summer. So yeah.
We heard from Pete Park when we talked to him that there's quite good fishing in QE2. Yeah. Was that?
Yes.
Yeah. Was that your experience too?
It was probably the best fishing we had found in a long time. And there was a lot of boaters out there that were just seemed like avid fishermen just there for the day kind of thing. So definitely good for fishing. We ended up launching from the south end of Head Lake, going all the way up Head Lake, and then through the Head River on the right. You end up portaging only once across this, I think it's a decommissioned, really small dam, so you can't actually get through it, and then into Fishhog Lake. And I think there's 2 or 3 other lakes north of that you can still portage into to get to further sites. But we ended up staying on the Fishhog Lake, which I think is just one portage in from Head River, which was a cool place to be. There's actually there's a farm that backs onto a corner of Head River. And so you get to a part in the river where you just see like 50 cows on the side of the river, just in the forest, just kind of hiding and lurking and watching you as you go by. It was kind of an unusual experience to see that big of a herd so close to the water line and in dense bush like that.
Camping with cows.
Camping with cows.
It's like some kind of new adventure.
Get out there, do some cow tipping.
Yeah, you see an animal like that at first, and you think, "Oh, it's a moose," right? So it was only till we kind of started to see them closer that we're like, "Oh, those are just domesticated cows hanging out."
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
I think you made mention that there's, yeah, there's some cottages in. I don't know if they're actually in QE2 or on the edge of QE2.
Yeah. So there are cottages on both sides of like the head river on either side of the portage. So there's still boat access for the people in Fishhog Lake. So you will see like decently sized power boats in that lake, and as well as obviously Head Lake. But I think north of that, the next portage, it's mostly just small boats from there on. So there are some people that actually live on the side of Head Lake or Head River that go into Fishhog Lake. But everyone was really nice. And it was actually interesting because all of the provincial parks I've been to, I see the park rangers, but I usually don't see them out on the site. I've never had a park ranger come to our site. Not that I would frown upon that by any means, but when we were at QE2, we actually had 2 park rangers come and visit our site and have a great talk with us and everything, which I thought just somewhat interesting because it's not a maintained park.
Yeah.
So you would think they would patrol the maintained parks more, but it seemed like they were patrolling the unmaintained one, which was interesting. But they were very nice. We had a great conversation with them. They just checked out our campsite, asked us a few questions, and they were on their way.
Cool. Well, I think Thomas and I had a couple show up in Killarney. Yeah. At one site, just sort of out of the blue. I don't even think we were awake yet. It was hearing, scampering of boots up the hill. It's like, what the heck's going on here? And yeah, it was a totally great experience. Have a yak about things. I found out I was fishing in a fishing sanctuary. So thankfully I didn't catch anything, but boy, did I ever feel bad about that. Cause I knew there were rules, there were certain places, and I didn't realize that that's one of the ones. I thought this was a fine one to fish in. So
it happens.
I can read fish maps better now.
There you go. Learn from your
And I
mistakes.
didn't get a ticket, so that's also good.
Yeah.
Yay,
Anytime
Rangers.
you can avoid it. Yay, Rangers.
Yeah.
So what other parks have you been to, Chris?
Kawartha Highlands Provincial Park is probably the main one that I've been to the most. I like that park because it's really big and it's reasonably close to the GTA area for commuting. Like you can get to it and launch relatively quickly in the day. And I also like that there are a lot of places around there where you could rent boats at reasonable prices, I found, compared to some of the other places that I was looking closer to the city. So it just worked out well that like I could go to Minden, get all the boats we needed, get all the gear we needed, then head to the launch. And it was just very practical. We launched from, I always say the name of the lake wrong, Anthroster Lake.
Oh. Yeah,
Anstruther.
Anstruther. There you go. Anstruther Lake. And then we went north up to Rathburn Lake, which I think was the first portage, and then to Copper Creek, which was the next portage, which had a really great waterfall. Copper Creek Waterfall is there. And it was actually really, really, really big. I thought it was going to be way shorter than it was. It was actually pretty intimidating. And then one more portage, I think, into Copper Lake. And we had a site on Copper Lake, which was, it was a good site. There was not a lot of people on that lake. So it was kind of nice to see just 1 or 2 campfires. You always want to see at least one other campfire, personally speaking, just to know someone else is out there. And that's where we saw the moose actually just off of Copper Lake there. So that was, I tend to stay in that area because I really like that park, but I definitely wanted to do the French River, especially after hearing some of your stories that you guys were going to do it. I get motivated from hearing your podcast to try new places. So it's always a new adventure when you go to a new park. So it's definitely one of the ones I want to do this year for sure.
Cool. I highly recommend it. It was a very unique experience because we haven't done river stuff. It's generally lake portage. So there were I think we totaled out at 3 portages, and all of them were shorties, like 200 meters sort of things. So no big deal. Finding them was a bit of a deal, but no big deal. The takeaway two takeaways for me from French River were not having heard about it, but not realizing just how easy it is to be what's the term, windbound. We got stuck, and it's like, I can't paddle in that, we'll be going backwards. So all the planning in the world, don't necessarily plan that that's where I'm going to be for 2 days, or that's where it doesn't work out that way. So at least that was our experience. And Georgian Bay is a big body of water, and if any wind comes up, wind was the takeaway. If any wind comes up, it's very puckering to be out in that. I was like, okay, dude, let's go. We got to go. Let's get out of this giant body of water. The swells and it just, it's a different animal, man. You don't want to be heavily loaded down and stuff like that, because you want as much clearance as possible. So, we learned. Nothing bad came of it.
Oh,
So.
I thought you were going to say nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Well, there is that. I'm a little old to venture too much. But yeah, no, French is highly recommended. And there's a burger place, the Bear. Shoot, I'm darn. You know what? I will email it to you.
Okay, thank you.
There's a place just outside of the park. Absolutely, like, stop and have that amazing burger. It was terrific. It's like, oh, so good.
Especially after a few days on camping food.
You bet. Although
you need the calories.
Yeah, well, it's the kid needs the calories more than I do, but yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, do you dehydrate food? Do you just buy prepared dehydrated meals, or what do you do for food when you're camping?
We try to pack pretty light. If it's an area where we know we can fish, we'll try to fish and eat that fish for our meals. So we'll try to pack lighter and just motivate ourselves, like, okay, we got to catch something because we need to eat. Yeah. But yeah, sometimes prepared food, sometimes like the easy stuff, like the mashed potatoes that you can just mix with water and stuff like that. But I do bring a lot of like protein bars and high calorie stuff as well that like I can eat quickly, because I'm the type of person where if we're portaging to site all day, I'm going to want to snack along the way. I'm not going to be able to just not eat until we get there, or if we take a break halfway through, that's probably going to be too much for me. So I tend to try to just break at every portage and eat a little something and just stop for 5 minutes and then keep going. But definitely food is hard, because I'm pretty new to camping. So I let some of my friends who are more experienced make the calls on what to bring and how much portions to bring and stuff like that. So it's nice having people that you're friends that are good at camping. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, and I mean, we've looked at, I'm sure that I haven't researched everything, but looking at the pre-made meals, like the ones that you can buy at Mountain Equipment or wherever, they're pretty darn expensive, man. Like,
yeah.
Cruising the aisle at Loblaws or whatever, and getting the mashed potatoes and stuff like that. So that that's reasonably priced stuff. There's nothing reasonable about the pricing for the freeze-dried meals, the prepackaged ones. Super easy to deal with. You don't have to spend. Well, I've already started dehydrating for next summer, right? So you spend some time doing that, and the dehydrator's not cheap and stuff. So you have to make sure that you're, whatever that, you're going to have it for 10 years. You're going to put the time into it, to make it be worthwhile. I'm envious of watching people on YouTube when they just, rip open the envelope, pour in the water, Ziploc it back up, shake it around, let it sit for 10 minutes, and then they're spooning it out. They don't even have to do dishes, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm envious of that. So
me too. Pros and cons.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it also helps to reduce our food waste, because this week alone, we had some blueberries that had been around for a little bit, and Tim threw them in the dehydrator, dehydrated them. So now they're in the freezer waiting to go backcountry camping. And then this week, Tim also made soup for dinner one night. We had it 2 nights actually for dinner, but there was, there's only so many nights you can eat the same thing. So some of it he thickened, made it into more of a stew, threw it in the dehydrator, and now it's also waiting for going backcountry camping next summer.
Yep.
Wow.
We tree hugger's kind of a thing for us. So it's just it's the dehydrator is part of excuse me, is part of our decor around here. It's out.
Yeah.
It's out. I occasionally put it away into the closet, but within maybe 6 weeks it comes back out because something else is going to be, a fruit is going to go for, I don't want to throw it out, or that where I make a big batch of some kind of soup or stew or something like that, and the freezer's already relatively full. I don't, you know what? It'll be cool. Having had Kevin Ride, who's an amazing. He's the guru of dehydrating foods and recipes and stuff, right? So having him on it, and I was like, oh, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't tried it because I hadn't thought about, just putting some total liquid into the dehydrator, but thicken it up a bit so it doesn't quite run off the edge of the sheet or what have you. And poof, now Thomas and I get to have not necessarily the Knorr brand or whatever, the dehydrated soup off the shelf. We get to have something that we made, like I make it from, I collect stock for pork stock, chicken stock, beef stock, and then at some point I do the slow cooker and whack a bunch of meats and vegetables and stuff into it and turn it into a soup. So yeah, I like it better too.
Yeah. I actually have a dehydrator myself, so I will start dehydrating as well for this year. I haven't yet, but I've only ever done beef jerky with it, kind of stuff.
Yep.
But I definitely want to do more stuff with it and take it with me on my next trips.
Cool. I'm going to try some fruit, some of the fruit ribbons, the fruit roll-ups type deal. I want to try to make some of those, because I think, like you're talking about the protein bars and stuff. It might be a good shot of energy, because again, the kid burns a lot of calories when he's 21. But it would be a good thing to have in his pocket for him to jam into his face on the portage or whatever.
And yeah, speaking of that, on our ill-fated first attempt at backcountry in Kawartha Highlands, I'd made a bunch of energy balls to take with us, just thinking, it'll give us some quick energy when we're paddling and we need some. Those were gone in the first hour or something that we were there. And they were meant to last for, I don't know, 5 days or 6 days or whatever we were supposed to be there.
So again, we learn things. You take about 4 pounds of granola bars and whatnot now, as opposed to take half a dozen. Oh, that should be ton. No, that's tons for like till lunch.
I heard a great story from one of my friends. It was kind of a cautionary tale about how he had done a trip a few years ago to Algonquin, and they had for some reason bought like 5,000 Skittles in a giant bag and decided to bring that with them. And on the way back, they were just portaging these Skittles home again. And they were all just frustrated that they were still had to carry them on the back leg.
Some Skittles.
That's hilarious.
Just all mad at the one guy who decided to bring them or whatever. But it's just a cautionary tale to make sure you bring stuff that you're going to consume, because you don't really want to portage food back.
No, although, if it's a little bit like so again, after that, I learned a lot on that first ill-fated trip, and subsequent ones, again, watching with it, it's pretty easy to figure out your own stuff, but with what I found with our kids is, because we're now 17 and 21, but over the years, growth spurts and stuff have been sort of up and down, and you're never quite sure. So in particular, because Thomas does like every backpack or every backcountry trip with me. I plan out a menu. I do pretty decent portion sizes because I know how much calories or how many calories we're going to burn. And then I pack extra meals. If assuming I'm packing, if Thomas packs, we're starving after about day 3.
Oops, we forgot to put
sorry,
that
I didn't
in.
do all the breakfast stuffs. Oh my God. But I make a point of packing extra meals, because if he starts burning harder than we expected, like we run into something where we are paddling our brains out in Georgian Bay, or he starts to hit a growth spurt or something like that, I'm dead in the water. It's like I have to have it for him, or else he starts getting wobbly and cranky and all those things. So I would take a chance on packing out a handful of meals. 5,000 Skittles, maybe not so much.
Maybe not so much.
Yeah, and we're not lugging coolers or something in the backcountry.
No.
Either.
Oh
No.
But though we've seen people do that. I still have a picture in my head. We went oh, how many years ago? 3, 4 years ago, maybe something like that. Thomas and I did a loop up through Canoe Lake, from like by the Portage. Is it the Portage store? Restaurant, but anyhow, up through Canoe Lake into Tom Thompson and out through the Joes. There's like Little Joe, Lost Joe, that sort of stuff. We did a loop there, and we were going from, so it's fairly easy, like an entry level sort of. The first portage is like a super highway. It's flat. There's nothing. There's passing lanes and stuff, right? And I watched people with a cooler on wheels going by me, and I went,
Wow.
I'm at an absolute loss. You're going just this portage, I imagine, because if you hit one more, that's
Yeah.
it. That's when you go, oh, that's why we didn't see anybody else with coolers. I mean, yay for you, but no, and boxes of wine on a dolly rolling past. It's like, okay, cool. I'm going to go a little farther in today, I think.
I think you're right. I think usually as you do more portages, you see less of those.
Yes, very much so. So question, if you're doing QE2 Kawartha, which is a favorite. Thomas and I do it in the fall every year, at least so far. Yeah, every year. Have you given thought to doing other things like Massasauga or Algonquin? Any of those?
I've wanted to do Algonquin. I know some of those portages can be pretty long.
Yep.
Not that necessarily deters me, but I prefer to have as much water time and as little portaging as possible.
Yep.
Which is part of the reason why French River is on my bucket list. Which I think a lot of people are like, who likes long portages?
Hikers, maybe, because that's what they do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I would, me personally, I would take 4 short portages over one big huge one, just in a, much as I don't want to load and unload. The more portages, that seems to be the trick, is the number of portages, the quieter it gets, the less foot traffic, less coolers, that sort of thing. So,
and one thing I didn't really recognize when I was looking at the portages is you see them on the maps for the parks, and they'll reference how many meters each portage is, but they don't necessarily reference the elevation change across the portage. And some of them can be fairly steep, which makes them sometimes much more challenging because they're just granite rocks and it's hard to get traction. And like a flat portage is very different from these steep ones that sometimes you see, which was a new experience for me.
Yeah, up and downs can be pretty brutal.
You guys ran into that in Killarney, didn't you?
We ran into that in Killarney. We had at least one. I think it was Stairway to Heaven is what the portage is called in Algonquin. That was like,
wow.
It's going up, it's going up, it's going up, it's going up. Oh, it's going down, 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 down. We had one in Killarney that Thomas actually threw up at the end of it. It was so brutal. And then we had to use ropes. The steepness of the final bit down to the water was so steep. We had to line our canoe down, and then on the way out, we had to winch it up by rope because we couldn't carry it up it was just too straight up. Topographical maps work well for that. Part and parcel with whatever other map, if your Friends of Killarney puts out a great map. Unlostified does a pretty decent job of it. They don't. It's not as good as a topographical. You can't really look at it yourself and go, okay, this is going to be a scary portage in a going up like elevation. But the guy that there's 2 guys that do it. One of the guys that does it is, I don't know if you've ever heard of Jeff's Maps.
Yep,
they used to.
I have.
Okay, so they were the de facto. They were the bomb. There some falling out. He went and started Unlostify. So what he does is because he's done the routes, it's exclamation marks. If it doesn't have anything, it's a pretty easy one. If it's got 1 exclamation mark, you're going to be sweating for it. If it's got 2, that's like where Thomas throws up at the end of it, kind of a deal. So that's good. And there's another fellow now. We're actually going to have him on in March. I think it's latlongmaps.ca. He's putting out some spectacular maps. I literally just got my first one. It's QE2, which is the only print map out there for QE2, so far as I know. I know that the Ontario Parks has a PDF like an online PDF, which I've already downloaded to the Zolio just so that I have it. But Pamela bought me. I'm not allowed to shop for myself from like 3 weeks before Christmas until we hit February, because Christmas and my birthday's in there. So it's like I have all kinds of things, on my wish lists and stuff like that at Amazon, at wherever. And QE2 map was on my wish list, so I got that. So I'm going to check it out. But it looks like he's put a ton of work into it. It's got great elevation. It's very easy to see the elevations in the topographical portions of it. It's got routes that don't cover up the other details of a map. Like you can see that it's a route, but you can also see that there's a river, like where the river is, however that's going to play out. It comes with its own scale ruler to go with it. It's packed up nicely. I highly recommend checking it out. It looks like the new de facto The Bomb, right? So yeah, there you go.
Good to know. Yeah, I'll definitely check it out.
And he's got, I want to say he's got 3 maps out. He might have 4 maps out. He's progressively doing them, but they're a ton of work. I can't even imagine. Yeah. No, thanks. But very cool.
I ended up getting one of the large Kawartha Highlands provincial park maps from provincial government or whatever it is.
Yep. Cool.
It's pretty nice to have.
What did I think when I first started? Of course, I knew of Jeff's maps, but it was I ordered a bunch of stuff. I think I ordered 3 or 4 of them from Algonquin and got those, and it was literally like the last time they ever shipped.
Wow.
It was done. They were just getting rid of whatever stock was left. So I got lucky on that. But I think Kawartha, and there was somewhere else that I was looking for, and I couldn't find maps. I also didn't know what I was doing other than Jeff's maps. So I ended up going to Mountain Equipment and figuring out where in the world they were, and then just buying the topographical maps. It's not at all what I was looking to do, but I got to learn fairly quickly, how to read maps and what. I already knew how to use compass and stuff, but topographical. So figuring out, that's going to be really, really sucky portage, or I'm, whatever, we're bushwhacking, or how is that much higher up than that? How does that can't be possible? And then you go and you do that and you go, yeah, it is. I'm never doing that again.
Yeah.
Cool. So give us a quick rundown on what your plans are for this summer.
So I was kind of worried because I wanted to get a site for the long weekend, which I've never been able to get before because we all know how busy that is. So I did the wake up at 5 a.m. on the day of, get there, like be on the website at 6:30, get ready for like the 7 o'clock when you can book. And so luckily I was able to get a site for Canada Day long weekend, which I'm really excited about. That's in Kawartha Highlands again. So we're going to do that one on Canada Day. I'll probably do another one earlier in May as well. That might not be French River because hearing from you about the wind, and I actually have a cottage on Georgian Bay, so I know about that. I don't think that's probably a good idea to do in May, so I'll probably push that one into later in the season. But then I might do Queen Elizabeth Wildlands in May, which is kind of nice because you have the flexibility of, if you just have a weekend coming up where all your friends are free, you don't have to book a site, so you guys can just say, all right, let's just go, we'll find something, which is nice because you don't have to have that planned 6 months in advance. As much as I do like to plan my trips in advance, some of my friends, their schedules are busy, so you find the times that work, and it's just very last minute most of the time.
Yeah, Tim was up at 5 o'clock to try to do the booking a long weekend for Sandbanks, and no way.
There were 3 sites left, period, in the park. There were 3 sites. I had them all. I checked them the night before, so they couldn't be gone in the morning. I checked them again in the morning. They were still there. I had the order that I was going to go from one to the next, knowing that it doesn't matter when it goes 070000. My fingers, it's like bang. I couldn't get any of them, so it was like, oh crap.
So we ended up at Charbot Lake, which I always want to say Shazbot, which is for old people like us.
Mindy,
it's a Mork and Mindy reference.
Robin Williams. So we're gonna do the long weekend, which is cool, but just not where we were planning to go.
Yes.
It's probably, I think, the busiest of all the weekends to try to book.
Oh, sure. Yeah. That May 2-4 and Canada Day, I think, are the two biggest money makers for Ontario parks.
Well, and as we've said before, I think you're not allowed to drink alcohol on
May
those
2-4.
weekends.
It depends. No, it's some parks.
Okay.
It's not all the parks, but yes. So it's like I'm not going camping then.
I have enough stuff to carry. I don't want to carry a bunch of alcohol.
Well, but you're doing backcountry, so we split our time, right? It's like
Okay.
when these guys are coming, we're front country camping.
Front country. That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
That's it for us for today. Thank you so much to our very special guest, Chris, for joining us, for our super fan. And we do so appreciate him reaching out to us. Please do also reach out to us. Our email address is hi@supergoodcamping.com. That's hi@supergoodcamping.com. We are on all the social media, so reach out to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.